Well, get ready for a long and bruising battle. It does look like Mitt Romney's pulling ahead in Florida pretty significantly. But again, this race has turned conventional wisdom on its head before, and Newt Gingrich has made it clear he is not going anywhere. The latest Quinnipiac University poll in Florida shows Mitt Romney with a commanding 14-point lead. Will he continue his strategy of beating up on Newt Gingrich?
I anticipate doing well. We've got a number of states coming up. I think I'm going to do well in them. My expectation is I'll become the nominee. So however long that takes, I'm going to keep on battling.
New York Times columnist Charles Blow and Salon.com's news editor Steve Kornacki join me now. Good to see you, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
I would make the argument that Newt Gingrich almost looked comfortable when he was on the attack this week. And let me play that for you. We'll see if you agree.
I'm afraid instead of looking about and blaming other people, they should just look in the mirror and say, okay, as people have had a chance to watch us each perform in those debates, they decided they liked him less, in part because he was paid $1.6 million by Freddie Mac. He stood up and supported Freddie Mac. The first debate, of course, the audience was quiet. And Speaker Gingrich said that threw him off. He can't debate before a quiet audience. Then the next audience was very loud, very loud. And he said that threw him off. He can't debate before a real loud audience. It's like Goldilocks, you know. Can't have it this way. It has to be just so.
Okay, right tape. I meant to say Mitt Romney, obviously. Is that what he's going to keep doing? Just keep pounding away?
Keep pounding away. And I think, it's working, but the danger for Mitt Romney is that people are souring on Gingrich, but not necessarily warming to Mitt Romney. And you see that in national trends, not in local trends. So what you have in Florida is, by some estimates, a 4-to-1 spending gap between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, where they are just bombarding.
Let's show that we actually have those numbers. And when I first saw those, they were absolutely astonishing. It's under number 4, guys, if you see those numbers. $15.9 million to $4 million. They are drowning him in negative ads. So it's not necessarily that people woke up one morning and said, oh, Mitt Romney, you are fantastic. We love you. No, absolutely not. What they are saying is that responding to these negative ads, they're saying, we don't necessarily like this guy because he's a bit wacky. He's a bit of a flip-flopper. They've called Mitt Romney a flip-flopper, so is Newt Gingrich. So that's the problem. But if you look at the national trends, for instance, Gallup released a poll on Friday that showed that Newt Gingrich's numbers were the highest they have been since voting started in January, and Mitt Romney's numbers are the lowest they have been since January. And that's among likely Republican. Is this unrelenting pounding, both by the Romney campaign and by the PACs? And again, guys, I'm going out of order here. I'm going to skip ahead to when we're talking about the $15.9 million versus the $4 million. Here's what Newt Gingrich just had to say about that money.
There was this huge wave of dishonest Romney ads. For a little bit, people backed up and went, wow, boy, frankly, if that stuff was true, I wouldn't vote for myself.
That's the first time I've heard him use that line, Steve.
You might hear it more, but I think there's another factor here that we really can't overlook. I mean, absolutely true, there's tons of money being used against Gingrich, and that's not going to let up either. I think we have to keep that in mind. But it's also sort of the respected opinion-shaping voices within the Republican Party, elected officials, commentators, party leaders, folks who sort of have a stake, a clear personal stake in who the party nominates this fall. They don't want to nominate somebody who they fear is going to take the party down. There is a palpable sense of fear among most sort of opinion shapers in the Republican side that Gingrich is a candidate who will do profound damage to the party if he's the nominee. And this is the second time we have seen this happen in this campaign. Back in December, if you remember, when Gingrich surged to the lead initially, they all sort of ganged up on him and they beat him down. It didn't just happen in Iowa where the super PAC ads were running. It happened nationally. And they kind of let up on him, let him back in the game in South Carolina. And since then, they've come back and they've pounded away at him in the last week. So I think that's another factor here. And I think this time, coming out of Florida. Let's say Romney wins tomorrow, wins big tomorrow. I think this time, as long as Gingrich stays in the race, those sort of elite opinion makers in the party are not going to let up on Gingrich because they don't want to make the same mistake
twice. But will those who don't like Mitt Romney then rally again the way they have before? Will they say, okay, this is going to be our last stand. When we go into these last conservative states, we really need to get behind Newt Gingrich?
They are not necessarily paying attention to the elite opinion makers. I mean, the grassroots voters are basically saying, we don't care what you say. And because if they did, you would see a change in national opinion in favor of Romney and away from Newt Gingrich. But what you're not seeing that, and what you are seeing is a continued rise of Newt Gingrich nationally, where you have people who are not being bombarded by the ads on a continual basis. Those people are basically saying, I understand that Chris Christie wants this guy. I understand that the local politician wants this guy. I understand that John McCain wants this guy. I do not. And that means that I'm going to pick someone else, and Newt Gingrich is the guy of the moment.
The only thing I would say to that is I think there might be a lag in the national polls in terms of picking up on the effect of the elite opinion makers, because we did see back in December when they all went to town on Gingrich, his national numbers did collapse. We did see after Iowa and New Hampshire, when there was a ton of positive press for Romney, that this whole 25% national ceiling disappeared. He opened a 23-point lead. It disappeared after South Carolina. But even over the weekend, Romney got his lowest numbers on Thursday, Friday. It was back to a 2-point national race on Sunday. I suspect if Romney posts a big win tomorrow, we will see again what we saw after Iowa and New Hampshire. He will surge to a big lead nationally.
Hold on a second, because we've got Lee Mirengoff here. Of course, he's the director of the Marist poll. And Lee, I assume you've been listening to this. Is there a lag when we see these national numbers?
Yeah, I think there's two factors. One is the lag in the national numbers, but the other is the bombardment within the state. I mean, you can't overlook this huge advantage that Mitt Romney's had in terms of the advertising campaign. Right now, Gingrich really hasn't laid a glove on him in Florida. Only 11% find Romney to be unacceptable. More than twice that find Gingrich within Florida to be unacceptable as well. So some of the national polls, I think, are going to catch up to this. But it's also, we get into a state, they get the campaign. The Romney campaign outspends Gingrich by a factor of 4 in Florida and elsewhere. It makes a big difference, except so far in South Carolina, which was really now looking like the exception, because it was such a southern state. We'll see if that happens.
Well, Lee, let me ask you about these Florida polls. The latest finds Romney up by 14 points. We mentioned that. But the key is that he's winning these groups that he wasn't expected to win. Evangelical Christians, members of the Tea Party. Very similar to what we saw in the NBC Marist poll that came out yesterday. Neck and neck for Gingrich and Romney among Tea Party. Now Romney winning evangelicals. Did that surprise you, Lee?
Well, I mean, it speaks to what's happening in Florida right now, and there's no doubt that Mitt Romney, first of all, he's running up the score with his strong groups, so people who are not Tea Party people who are moderates, higher income, higher educated, women.
Women, look at the number for women. It's incredible, the difference there.
Yeah, big gender gap there, but he's also, on the other side of the equation, he's cutting his losses, breaking even narrowly ahead among the groups he would love to carry. Tea Party, very conservative, evangelical Christians, male voters in Florida. So right now, as I say, he's running up the score with his strong groups. He's shoring up his base there, but among the groups that he's had trouble with, let's say in South Carolina, he's not having the kind of trouble in Florida that he did there. So right now, look, he's in the driver's seat going into tomorrow's primary.
Newt Gingrich was at the Jacksonville Hyatt this morning. We were listening to him, and I guess it's not a surprise. He was saying, 5%, we're really closing the gap here. Can things move that quickly in Florida?
Well, you need something to happen. And there was one poll out that was really, as we say, an outlier. It was atypical from all the others. And that showed 5 points. Everybody else right now is showing double digits. The poll you mentioned at the top of the program, 14. We're at 15. Right now, it would take a political earthquake to change this landscape.
All right. Lee Mirengoff, it's always good to see you. Thank you so much, Lee. So barring this unforgivable, mistake that Mitt Romney would make, the polls do indicate that there's big trouble. But a couple things that happened over the weekend. Herman Cain endorsing Newt Gingrich over the weekend, and Sarah Palin coming to his defense. We want to play that for you.
Look at the players in the establishment who are fighting so hard against him. They want to crucify him because he's tapped into that average, everyday American Tea Party grassroots movement. If for no other reason, rage against the machine, vote for Newt. Annoy a liberal, vote Newt. Keep this vetting process going. Keep the debate going.
Can this anti-establishment... Oh, you love Sarah Palin.
You had to play her when I was on the air, didn't you?
Go ahead. Bring it on.
She lives on annoying a liberal. That is her whole... That's how...
Your entire body language changed.
Oh, my God. I can't take it. Go ahead.
Well...
but can this whole anti-establishment... a rallying cry make a difference? Because here's my question, really, Steve. It's that if the expectation is 15 points, if the expectation is 12 points, and he comes in at 9 points, still a pretty good trouncing. But does that, in a weird way, give him some kind of momentum?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that. The other thing, and I think this was in Lee's poll to keep in mind with the Florida numbers, is there's been early voting in Florida, and all indications in the polling that's been out there shows that Romney has sort of a lopsided advantage there. So even if the Palin thing, even if the Herman Cain thing kind of kicks in late and helps Gingrich, he has this extra hurdle to overcome with the votes that are already banked. But I do think the interesting question in terms of Cain, in terms of Palin, in terms of that wing of the party maybe rallying to Gingrich late is, think ahead to Super Tuesday. If this race goes that far, if there's still some suspense, that's going to be a day that's dominated by these southern primaries. And you look at the deep South states, and if there's a recipe that Gingrich can exploit, to embarrass Romney, it's the sort of demographics of these deep South states, extremely Tea Party friendly, extremely evangelical, as conservative and sort of as Palin friendly, Cain friendly as they get. So if Gingrich can somehow remain really, truly viable into early March, maybe those states will get interesting. The problem is February sets up, right now at least, it looks so friendly to Romney. If he gets on a roll there, maybe he has the momentum in it.
And we have heard it before.
But you have a cooling period. I mean, that's the other thing is that you come out of a primary with momentum, but it doesn't roll over for a month. So you cool off quite a bit between now and the next primary. And what you pinpointed exactly, what Newt will be able to exploit is the fact that, there are not a lot of Mormons. I mean, I'm from the South. It's not like, this idea of openness is not necessarily a Southern trait. It is very narrow. Florida has a lot of very northern voters and transplants, and that is helping Romney in Florida. You will not have that in the South.
All right, going to take a real quick look at the calendar here because I think it's instructive to the point you were making. When you look at these states in February, much more friendly to Mitt Romney. But then you go into March, and Newt Gingrich says he's not going anywhere. And you look at some of these southern states, and he thinks he can do well there. So more to talk about in future days. Gentlemen, thank you.
We have to come back.
I might let you. And I will look everywhere for Sarah Palin. So just to get you worked up. Guys, thanks so much.
Sure,
really appreciate it.